For over 30 years, Littleton has been helping people just like you sell their coins and currency. Whether you're an experienced collector or someone who needs help identifying what you have in your collection, Littleton Coin Company is a place to sell your U.S. coins and currency. The process is incredibly simple. Visit littlecoin.com/majority to learn more. Excuse me. Visit littletoncoin.com/majority to learn more.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, August 25th, 2017. My name is Michael Brooks on a Michael Friday, and this is the 4-time winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Cliff Schecter, joins me to discuss Donald Trump cutting bait, a possible Republican civil war, and Roger Stone warning of blood on the streets and an actual civil war if Trump is impeached. Plus, voting systems heading into 2018 are still vulnerable to every type of manipulation you could imagine. This is a bigger story than Russia or not Russia, everybody. This is about election integrity across the board. And film guy Matthew Weiss will join us to recommend a movie, to wonder what else Matthew will have on his mind. He'll probably have some new spiritual tips, maybe, cultural insight.
Merchandise.
There is a really dangerous storm headed, I believe, to Texas. We'll be monitoring that as well. This could be the first sort of major FEMA crisis of the Trump administration. You can imagine the incompetence and casual racism that characterized the Bush administration's response to Katrina. One can only imagine the levels of incompetence and racism that will characterize this crew. Bob Corker called Trump, questioned his stability. It took him a week to hit him back, but Donald Trump did just that, questioning.
Counterpuncher.
I never punch first. Questioning Bob Corker's stability. Shocker.
He's sick.
Totally unfair and a bad guy. All that. And then, of course, in the fun half, your calls and IMs on today's Majority Report. Let's do this Corker stuff up front. So this is from, when was this? It was about a week, last Friday. Bob Corker, who's a very conservative senator in Tennessee, was approached by AP reporters. And I think we'll talk about this more with Cliff, but this is the kind of wheels coming off. There's been stages of Republican delusion about Donald Trump. And so first was that somehow he wouldn't be a front runner in a Republican primary, which is crazy because, yes, I mean, my God, Republican base would, of course, be totally repulsed by a message of xenophobia and racism.
Racist billionaire?
Yeah, wait. Every single thing that this party has rewarded and forwarded for decades would somehow be, offensive to...
It's objectified in my body.
It's literally who I am. I am the worst of everything in one vehicle. And then, of course, he won. Moving forward, then clearly they had this plan going in, which is like, look, Pence will run the show. He'll be babysat. We'll fly him around. We'll tell him he's president. He'll get to play with all the big toys. And then we'll get rid of health care, destroy the environment, get rid of financial deregulation, maybe escalate some wars. They have been escalating some wars. And give away money to rich people, and he can just sort of be president. That's obviously not working because, well, Bob Corker might have some insight about this. They're asking Bob Corker, and Senator Corker had some thoughts about Trump's stability.
The president has not yet been able to demonstrate the stability nor some of the competence that he needs to demonstrate in order to be successful. And we need for him to be successful. Our nation needs for him to be successful. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. We need for our president, the world needs our president to be successful.
Actually, quite the opposite. It's the sort of bizarre saving grace in some ways of the time we're living in is Trump's lack of stability and competence. And shockingly, Donald Trump, it took him, how long was this? It took him about a week.
A full week.
A full week to counterpunch. I would imagine. I don't think that General Kelly actually takes the phone literally out of Trump's hands, but the amount of trinkets they had to put in front of him, the amount of distractions, the amount of I wonder what they tell him, like when he's about to do a Bob Corker tweet. Like, I heard that, that
Jesse Waters said ESPN's really stupid these days, and you need to see this right away.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. ESPN is totally with Barack and against me, and it's unfair. Well, Donald Trump did finally respond as of this morning. Strange statement by Bob Corker, considering that he's constantly asking me whether or not he should run again in 2018. Tennessee, not happy. And this remains the most bizarre thing about Donald Trump, because it's like, this is truly what he is best at. He's not good at real estate. He's not good at casinos. His businesses have been bankrupted. His daddy needed to fund him. His daddy needed to bail him out. He, I guess he's also good at reality TV. And apparently he's good at doing fake scam university. But the true gift that Donald Trump has is not for business. It's not for entrepreneurship. It's not for certainly any type of political leadership. But he owned Republicans so well during the primary. He decimated these horrible mediocrities. Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, one after the other. And now I wonder when this article, this is from the vetting process, so this wasn't recently re-leaked. But apparently, Bob Corker was on Donald Trump's list. He was under consideration for VP. And Secretary of State. This was for Secretary of State. I had actually think that Bob Corker was floated, I think also briefly for VP. This was during the transition. And Corker, who does sit on the Foreign Relations Committee, was also considered for Secretary of State. Trump had a lot of fun with this process. You remember that picture in the Manhattan restaurant of Mitt Romney looking like, hello, this is Mitt Romney. I'm being tortured and emasculated in real time. But apparently Bob Corker was on that, was not tall enough to make it on Trump's short list. And this is a piece, this is from USA Today. I'll read from it. Jack McElroy reported that U.S. Senator Bob Corker lists his height as 5'7". I think that's wishful thinking. My growth spurt, such as it was, topped out at just below 5'4". I've lost altitude since then. Still, anytime I've shaken hands with Corker, we're pretty much eye to eye in height, if not in policy. So it wasn't a huge surprise for me that when the Daily Caller reported last week that Corker's diminutive stature helped disqualify him for the Secretary of State's job. So
See, I just think you're not tall enough to be Secretary of State, so take that.
I don't think you're tall enough. Maybe in a certain sense, you're not tall enough to be a senator. Is there, like, anything that Donald Trump does? Like, we go through history of, like, all of the great people in history who would just be immediately disqualified. I mean, obviously, because, you know, Cesar Chavez was Mexican. MLK was black. But then we're also going to start getting into, like, disqualified. But, like, FDR was in a wheelchair. Could he really negotiate? Like, in a certain sense, wasn't he the one that maybe we would have won World War II faster? Like, is that the thought
It's hard
process?
to know how Trump would use that, actually. Like, what do you say about, and maybe he would have lived out his final term.
Maybe he would have lived out. A lot of people would have liked him to live out his final term. I would have liked him to have been tougher.
And I'm definitely going to live out mine.
You know? How does it all end, Matt? We have a couple more minutes before we get to Cliff. How does this all end?
Well, I have predicted that he was going to resign. When I remember, like in January, I have the group chat to prove it that
Right.
I don't think he would be there in a year, which I think it's wishful thinking. But if I have to plant my flag down anywhere, I want to be on the wishful side of things.
So he's out in a year, and then is it Pence in 2020?
As the nominee.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think they'll run Pence as a general election candidate.
Because Pence is so toxified and
Yeah.
unpopular to begin with. So who do the Republicans go with if we're in this fantasy scenario?
It's not gonna be Flake Jeff Flake.
No, Flaky Jeff is not running.
I could see maybe a Kasich thing. I don't know. It's hard to say because it's hard to know how Trump. If
It's
Trump
still
is removed,
the Trump
right?
party.
Like, yeah,
it can't
exactly.
be Kasich. Kasich has shown a glimmer of sort of indirect human decency, and that's not going to work.
Well, I that's why I think it's hard to say. It's hard to say because who knows what exactly will happen if Trump is removed from office. Like if it's a complete meltdown of the party, it's all contingent on that. I feel like because a lot of this, I think a lot of where people come down on after that is going to be different than where you'd expect.
Right. Hey, thanks everybody for 577 people on Patreon for the Michael Brooks Show. Usually we're Tuesday night live, but tonight, since we're on vacation next week, tonight at 6 p.m. live, Nation of Islam Obama is launching a late night TV show. We have that. Right Wing Mandela has interviewed Andy Kindler for his radio show. And Brianna Joy Gray is going to be with me in studio to talk about her piece in Current Affairs on sort of knockoff intersectionality, undermining left arguments, that and a whole lot more. Thanks, everybody, for making that happen. I think now we can get Cliff. So let's take a brief break, and we will be right back with Cliff Schecter on the Majority Report.
Pressures of life and it up, yeah. Now stay down, mama, time pick it up. Now bother with it down, full style, strictly up, full vibe. Pick it up when the bills, them the rent and the mortgage due, yeah. When me try this, when your best friends are gone and it's only you. Light up a split, turn up the music, skanking sweet. Everybody wanna feel like free. Forget your troubles and the rock.
With me, welcome back to the Majority Report. I'm Michael Brooks. Joining us now is Cliff Schecter. Cliff, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Yeah, well, excuse me. You know what, Cliff? confess, I'm totally exhausted,
play
and
my
that's
song,
why,
did
and
you?
that's why I'm just about to get to it. That's why I made the
I thought
mistake.
maybe you played it before I came on. You know, I wasn't sure.
My apologies. Before we talk to Cliff, we have to stick to tradition, and we have to play. It's not only is it a great sort of primer on Cliff, it's actually a kind of good sort of public disclosure of any possible conflicts of interest that Cliff might have in the following conversation.
That's why I like to do it.
Yeah, so without further ado, the Cliff Schecter theme song.
Cliff Schecter, Libertas LLC. New media, public relations, and strategy. You want any of these services, you know who you gotta see. Cliff Schecter, Libertas LLC.com.
I like .com. That's my
the good
favorite
part.
part, the fade out .com.
You got to get that in there, you know? I mean, otherwise, who knows where you're going to find me?
It's right. Well, we can also find you on Twitter. Cliff, it's really fun to have you in studio, man. We got to get you in studio someday when I'm hosting.
That's right. Well, we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
I think in the last year I've been there twice. We can probably up that a few times.
Yeah, that sounds good.
You know, get rowdy. Maybe I won't even bring the kids next time. Who knows what'll happen?
Yeah, if you could not bring your children, because I usually would like to use more profanity when you're on air, that would be great.
Dude, you couldn't use any more profanity than I use in front of them around the house. So I think you're okay.
All right, so good. So really quick, Cliff, we're about to get to this Roger Stone sound, but do you have a podcast update for everybody?
I do. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, we
Yes.
are on. We've taped. We've got about 5 of them out there now. They're all free content at this point. iTunes. You
Cool.
can find it. Unprecedentedpodcast.com. Unprecedented. And you know what Genius Donnie tweeted out that time.
Yep.
And that'll take you to our iTunes, and then that is the most important thing. And go listen. You need to put up ratings. Give us as many stars as it'll allow you to do, so people will think we are. You know, they'll be like, "Whoa, that is a hot podcast right
It's a
there."
hot topic.
And that's right. We need that, folks. So please go do that, and then. For the low price of $5 a month, you can also get the paid content at Patreon, which is going to start soon, and we're going to have some damn sexy stuff in there, folks. I got to tell you.
Sounds good, man.
As Trump would say, I got to tell you.
You're the one who's unprecedented.
Yeah,
you're
I'm
the one.
unprecedented.
You're the one. So, Cliff, we're going to get to how Donald Trump is starting to distance himself from the GOP, and I've been saying, for a while that. And it's very important to always remember that this breakup, if it's happening, and it's not really happening, but this skirmish is happening not because of any ethics or conscience on the part of Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan. It's because the plan isn't working. But
you're funny because you said ethics and then you said McConnell and Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even need a tag on that joke. So Roger Stone, they caught up with Roger Stone. And Roger Stone is, one of the only people, in addition to being sort of, extravagantly kind of like professionally deeply unethical and at least overt about it, he is, this is the Donald Trump sort of brainstem. This is the Donald Trump mind. I mean, you look at Alex Jones or Roger Stone to know what's happening. And so you have
You know what else he is, though?
Yeah, what
too,
else
which
is he?
Really, I don't mean to interrupt
No,
you,
go
but
ahead.
this is a meta kind of thing.
Yeah.
He is, for those here who ever watched the X-Files,
Right.
he's the smoking guy.
I've never
He's
watched
basically-
it. What's the smoking
You go
guy?
to any, basically he's the guy who shows up at every sort of conspiracy, like when JFK is killed, anything bad that happens,
Right.
there's a guy there who kind of, that's Roger Stone. He's like the Forrest Gump of crappy stuff in U.S. history since Nixon. Basically,
Right.
Right. He's with Nixon for Watergate. He was in the Reagan shop. Iran-Contra eventually grows out of that. He brags about having played a role in the Brooks Brothers riot that helped them stop counting the votes. So George W. Bush became president in 2000. He's now Trump's hatchet man. So he's
done work for Trump, I think, off and on since the 80s, going back for just sort of helping, shill for Trump's, casinos and various scams that he was up to in the 80s. And those, of course, are all, and also Roger Stone has a Roy Cohn connection as well. So, I mean, this is this sleazy,
If there's a new We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel, he will have to show up in there.
Exactly.
If there's an ugly event in U.S. history politically at any time in the last sort of 40 years, he's probably been pretty close to it. And
this is it. You get a taste of how he operates right here, because Donald Trump is distancing himself from Republicans. We'll get to that in a second. But here's the Roger Stone version from the operative Alex Jones, which is the Republican base, or a significant part of the Republican base side, of a shot across the bow to, don't press Donnie. TMZ caught up with him. I don't know what airport this is, LAX, and this is what Roger Stone had to say.
Even calling for like impeachment already and that sort of stuff. Do you think there's any chance that he might be impeached?
The people who are calling for impeachment are the people who didn't vote for him. They need to get over it. They lost. Their candidate had every advantage. She spent $2 billion. He spent $275 billion. Sorry, he whipped her ass. It's over. You lost. Try to impeach him. Just try it. You will have a spasm of violence in this country, an insurrection like you've never seen.
You think?
No question.
You think if he got impeached, like the country would go
Both sides are heavily armed, my friend. Yes, absolutely. This is not 1974. The people will not stand for impeachment. A politician who votes for it would be endangering their own life. There will be violence on both sides. I'll make this clear. I'm not advocating violence, but I'm predicting it.
You're predicting that if he got impeached, there'd be some sort of civil war type.
Yes, I do. That's what I think will happen.
So, I think obviously that's framed at Democrats, but I think that, it just as easily could be turned on the Republican leadership if they get out of line rhetorically. Remember, they're not going to actually do anything. Or really
any Republican, who's willing to vote for it, he's threatening. And again, remember
or I think even speak against him, not even vote for it. Yeah.
Right. Well, and remember the context of all of this, too. I mean, of course, he's not advocating it.
Right.
He's just, here he is, what are we now, 2 weeks since the events in Charlottesville?
Yep.
Where an innocent woman is murdered because of a lunatic right-winger egged on by Trump and the gang.
Yep.
And the gang, quite literally. And, and after that, and, I've certainly been on this show enough times talking about how easily we've made it for every lunatic to get their hands on assault weapons and other, weapons, which he's right, nobody had access to that kind of weaponry in 1974. I like how he brought that up, that maybe Nixon would have been impeached, and clearly he thought that was wrong. Had it been a different situation. And in a way, this is what been the exercise of far-right groups in the NRA, because they've always been about bullets over ballots. So,
right.
You've got an armed group of people who are not all there and are being egged on by people by Roger Stone. What could go wrong? I don't know. I'm a big believer in the First Amendment, obviously, but at what point are you, I do wonder, I talk about this a lot these days, at what point are you inciting riot? At what point, I guess he gets away with it because he said, I'm not advocating it.
He's
all about it.
Right. I mean, he's strictly within, my view is that when you do, even if it's totally disingenuous, he definitely carved enough space for himself where you can't, that speech you can't do anything about that speech, and I wouldn't. But I do think that it's very,
we can hold him accountable.
We can hold him accountable, and we can also be really clear that, look, this also runs parallel with this fantasy or this theory that, Bannon is going to go back to Breitbart and go to war against Trump. And I noticed that they kind of wrapped his knuckles a little bit in Afghanistan, as if they, certainly they could care less about all the civilian casualties we caused there. And then in addition to that, Bannon was not even a non-interventionist on Afghanistan. Bannon just wanted to outsource an occupation to Blackwater, which is, so kind of comically kind of, neo-colonial that even the sort of present military-industrial complex, laughed that idea out of the room, and obviously just a sort of pure grift for Eric Prince and other people that Bannon is close to. But I think that, the reason I connected with Roger Stone is I still think that this media apparatus, whether it's Jones or Breitbart or Stone, and let's also include a lot of Fox News in this, they're still at a point where they might drill into, Jared and Ivanka, who are terrible people, and I have no sympathy for, but they'll play the anti-Semitism angles on that, and they'll say that, there's a Democratic thing in the White House. But I still see no indication that this overall, that swamp is going to turn on Donald Trump. I mean, maybe they will, but I think that the base still is a total mind meld with him, and those media outlets are still a conduit for him. And the next phase of it is to threaten and insinuate and, get back to it. Just like, by the way, they did before the Republican convention when they were like, look, if you try to take this away from us, there were plenty of sort of, indirect and not so indirect threats, just like Stone was kind of predicting or saying will happen. He wouldn't advocate, but it will happen there as well.
No, I mean, that is exactly right. Again, the one of the few saving graces so far of this group of people is they've proven incompetence at causing nearly as much mayhem and trouble as they want to. And at the same time, also, I guess, even the infighting among so many of them who, in their own ways, are often pure evil, it is also something that has prevented them from being able to cause as much damage as they potentially could. But there should be no, people shouldn't ever kind of wonder if they would and what they would like to see happen. And with Bannon rejoining Breitbart and working with some of these far right groups he works with, I think we can expect to see him, this all play out in terms of the rhetoric that they're going to use. There's no doubt Kushner. I mean, you already saw it in some of those neo-Nazi videos with him targeting, in a way, saying, "Well, Kushner. I mean, they've Jewified Donald Trump's grandchildren," and Right. But Gary Cohn, who just spoke out, and believe me, I don't have sympathy for him either. I don't have sympatany for anybody who's stuck with.
Gary Cohn leaked that he was appalled by the pro-Nazi comments that Trump made. But I mean, Gary Cohn and Steve Mnuchin are, in some ways, the most disgusting wife to be
people. A really nice woman, though.
Steve Mnuchin's wife is very insightful, and she's encouraging people to sort of get beyond politics and enjoy HBO Go. And I think that's very big of her. But, I mean, Steve Mnuchin and Gary Cohn, the strategy that Sam outlined a couple weeks ago of just, massive public and personal shaming in the Jewish community of those two people needs to continue. I mean, they are, and the thing is like, look at their records. I mean, the foreclosure king, a Goldman banker. I mean, you would expect them to be grotesque people. But it is amazing that even on the level of like, something that would personally implicate them in their own identity, they don't care. It's disgusting.
Right. Have you ever, I have to say, I've always enjoyed the fact, I must say, though, that Steve Bannon, who, is this nationalist and anti-Semite and the whole rest of it, basically, I mean, he's made his money first at Goldman Sachs.
Right.
Then he went on to managing, various, I think he had a hedge fund, something of that nature. But eventually, he managed various media properties as part of this fund he was involved in. And one of the things of where he's made a ton of money is that he actually invested in initially and owned a piece of Seinfeld.
Right. And
so
he made some money off Seinfeld. That's
Jews, right. This guy who hates Jews supposedly is still making millions from exporting, probably beyond, aside from Woody Allen, maybe the cultural property that exports Jewish neuroses and comedy to as far out in the world as possible.
Think about it. I mean, I actually did a bit. I don't even remember at which show it was on, but I did a bit about Bannon actually being on writing staff with Larry David and Seinfeld and injecting, just like, what about there's another one where the friggin' Jews go on a no jerk-off contest, and like David and Seinfeld liking the concepts but needing to tone them down a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I wonder, what is that joke in Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry David introduces somebody to his cousin as the cause of anti-Semitism? It's like, my cousin, he's the cause of anti-Semitism. I don't know if those shows are doing. Maybe that's Bannon's most genius stroke. Because if I could convince the world that all Jews are like Jerry Seinfeld, then we have another chance.
That's true. Maybe that's what he's up to.
Yeah.
Hard to know.
I also think that people like Bannon, they sort of. They're part of these class of, they would consider themselves some type of, intellectual elite, and, I can play these games and sort of, use these things instrumentally, and then we have like the moron foot soldiers. I think he very much kind of fantasizes and thinks about himself in that way. And speaking of fantasizing and sort of sense of self-perception, I mean, now that things, I think especially if Menendez is removed from the Senate, then we're right back to decimating healthcare being in play. So I'm with, I don't ever want to say never on that, but I do think, look, so far repealing Obamacare has failed. So far they haven't been able to put together, this massive upward tax redistribution plan that they've been cooking up. So far, they've done an incredible amount of damage at the agencies and everything, and obviously the world is a significantly worse place since they've come into office. But the real kind of plan, to the extent that they had one, which is essentially just Ryanization and Koch brothers, got the social safety net plan that they had in place, a lot of it has been bottlenecked. And now Donald Trump is distancing himself from the Republicans and kind of at least getting back, I guess, after trying for a little while, his initial rhetorical approach, which is that somehow he's this sort of distinct right-wing populist entity who's at war with the establishment. Obviously, it's, a scam like everything else with the guy, except for the racism part. But it does seem like just as the Republicans are starting to be like, okay, we can't babysit this guy and get the agenda through for the Koch brothers and the donors, he's getting back to like, hey, you guys said that this would work, and it's not, and I'm unpopular, and I'm going to go back to my instinct of being the kind of social media ringleader, hitting back Flake and Corker and everybody
the demagogue who will play to anybody's passions and anger and fear, and because that's what he's good at.
Right.
He was at his best, and when I say his best, I mean in terms of how he sees himself and in terms of what he likes to do at that Phoenix rally.
Yep.
It's ground zero there for the anti-immigrant movement. Yep. I spent some time there when I wrote my book on McCain back in 07, 08, and already you could see sort of the incipient kind of Tea Party, which I think grew out of a lot of that Minutemen, craziness on the border there before it even made it to other parts of the country. And, that is him in his element. That is him getting up and talking about our heritage in a crowd like that with Arpaio there, known, his day job, I think, was basically just to be a racist.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
And that's Donald Trump. And so it will be interesting because, of course, it was funny, Mitch McConnell, who's ever the tactician for big capital, realized that fighting with Trump wasn't going to be good for the people that send large bribes to him to make his career work the way it does. So McConnell, of course, started apologizing, and sent out, sort of trying to tamp down a little bit on all those reports that he and Trump had screamed at each other on the phone, and realizing, I need to get along a little bit better with the guy. I don't like him. He's nuts. But and then Trump returned the favor by insulting him, maybe in a little bit of a lesser way, a little lighter way, but insulting him again on Twitter. So Trump just can't. People ask, is it strategy and tactics, or is it delusion? And my answer is always yes. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not. They blend into each other. I think sometimes he does think about it and say, I'm at my best when I'm fighting and blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, he can't control himself either. If he sits there and logically decides to pick these fights is to be wrong also. It all blends into each other. He's a mess. He always has been in everything he's done. And we should be at least, it's not great foreign policy-wise, certainly, because, unless you like, unless being brinksmanship with North Korea and the rest. But it has helped us domestically because he's not been able to do anything because he's undermined relationships with every Democrat. George W. Bush, say what you want about him, had a good half a dozen to a dozen Democrats he coaxed to work with him on certain things. Think of a Zell Miller type. And there's no doubt.
Well, I'm sure Zell Miller would be happily working with Donald Trump.
He probably.
I
would.
mean that guy
in
was
Zell Miller's defense.
yes.
In Zell Miller's defense, he's a crazy racist.
Yes, Zell Miller turned out to be for everybody who kind of. I mean, it's crazy because Zell Miller was part of my first sustained political exposure, and I was like, how the fuck does a guy like this become? I mean,
he was a nut, but
he was a Democrat who turned out to be a kind of arch insane reactionary. Who do you challenge some MSNBC host to a duel? That's like
Chris Matthews,
right? Which would have
awesome.
been it would have been great to watch.
That would have been if they wanted to make money. MSNBC, high ratings.
High ratings, great.
But the thing is that I think had Trump behaved differently in terms of his temperament and attacking Democrats. I mean, again, he wouldn't be Trump then. But had he done that once he got in, had he actually been able to pivot in the way that Philip Rucker so badly wants him to,
right?
Then I think Joe Manchin and Heidi Heitkamp, he could have potentially found those one or two Democrats to work with. But instead, he's alienated every single one of them. And on top of that, a number of Republicans. It's interesting how when you threaten to go after Alaska, so much so that there's an Interior Department investigation over it. Lisa Murkowski might not be inclined to work with you.
Well, and I also think I have two quick thoughts on that. I mean, one is the smaller point with Lisa Murkowski is Lisa Murkowski's already several years ago, she lost a Republican primary to a totally bonkers nutcase Tea Party candidate.
Miller.
She ran as an independent and she beat him in the general election. So I think she already has she has a confidence in her popularity in her state. She's kind of like, look, what are you going to do? You're going to do the same thing to me. It happened in 2010. I'll just come back. Like, I've got a seat.
Right.
Don't try to threaten me. And she, and
it's the same thing with, I'll say quickly, with Susan Collins.
Right.
I worked in Maine politics before, and she is a brand separate from the Republican Party, a 70-something% approval rating, which is always to the chagrin of Democrats who can't get that down. So she's thinking of running for governor, and much like Angus King, who now caucuses with the Democrats, who was elected twice as a governor, running as a sort of centristy kind of guy, Susan Collins easily could do the same thing and win enough of the vote to be elected governor of Maine. So she doesn't have to kowtow to Trump either.
Right.
And right there, you're now down to 50.
And I think the bigger, those two. I think that's exactly right. And again, I bigger macro point, I give them almost no credit because I mean, they're very well to the right. I don't buy them as moderates, but I will always add the caveat
I'm not saying they're
no, I know you're not, but I just will say in the context of the healthcare vote, McCain got all of the drama and the glory, but it was totally Collins and Murkowski who, held the line and set the context for that to happen. So in that conversation, they deserve by far the most credit and kind of face down the most. And that's, always important to remember. But I think, the slightly bigger point is that and I remember Bhaskar Sankara and I talked about this in the transition, and we said, in some ways, in addition to what you're saying about him reaching out to people, the most terrifying scenario of what Trump could have done, and I never thought it would happen because one, he's not really a strategist, and two, obviously there isn't a genuine commitment there. But if you had some sort of weird Bannon vision where basically they came in and they said, we're not really going to touch healthcare. We're going to, propose some break up the banks type thing. We're going to do a top end tax increase, which, it was a leak that Bannon supported. And we're also going to do an infrastructure project that's real. That's not just a giveaway. And and look at antitrust, like objectively good, important, progressive things. And then they fuse that up with terrorizing immigrants like they already are doing, the Muslim ban, banning transgender people from military service. You would have I actually think Bannon is not
have
wrong.
Like a 60% approval.
Yes, and I think he is not wrong when he says in some interviews that if we followed an agenda like that, we could get a significant part of African American, Hispanic, like that, and that is where the kind of center across the board, I think, still just does not get modern politics. Because if you look at these numbers, they're incredibly encouraging from the perspective of the things that we need to do about income inequality and reining in the corporate sector, and they still can get incredibly discouraging and disturbing when it comes to regard to things like xenophobia about immigrants, as an example. So if they had followed that would have been terrifying because it might have been really effective.
Well, that's it. I mean, on one front, it would have been great that we would have gotten
Yes.
a real infrastructure and
Right.
gotten a better tax system. And
Exactly.
antitrust, I think, to me, is one of the most key issues of all, is what
Yes.
monopolies are doing to our economy right
Definitely,
now. But
definitely.
taking that aside, if that ended up being in service of hurting immigrants, hurting women, hurting people of color, hurting, transgender, gay military, gays and transgender people who want to be in the military and others, well, then that would be incredibly sad and incredibly dangerous. And
It would be it would be quite literally fascistic. I mean, it
would.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the right way to say it. I mean, it would
Yeah.
destroy the fabric of this country is what
Right.
it would do.
Right.
And frankly, hurt many of my friends. So,
Right. That's right.
and that would piss a lot of us off who actually want an equal country. So I agree, because look, cheap demagoguery is easy. I mean, our system is always sort of susceptible to that. We have a lot of institutions that push back. They have against Trump, even though some, it's been like a stress test for them, and some have failed, some haven't, and that's great. But we've had our demagogues in history, and they've been dangerous. And Trump the thing is, if Trump was just a clever demagogue and not actually nuts,
Right.
then this could have been a lot more worrisome, frankly, and much more dangerous for us.
We keep having these terrible, getting saved from even worse fates by how insane they are. Barack Obama offers a terrible deal in 2011 on Social Security and Medicare,
Yep.
and it doesn't pass because Tea Party people are so demented that it's not good enough. They get 70% of what they want, maybe even 80, but it needs to be 100. It was like they needed Obama to say, and in addition to phasing out Social Security, I apologize for being black and I resign. And they were like, and until that happens, it's not good enough for these people. And now with Trump, yes, you have the basic. I mean, I think for him, it's that he's a lunatic. And then I think structurally for Republicans, it's running up against the reality. And you saw it obviously with healthcare of like, oh, shit, now I actually literally have to vote to kill people. This was fun to, and that's the kind of other dynamic of what's going on.
But had they been willing to just damage certain unpopular aspects of Obamacare, and the right hadn't been such again, as you're right, such a bunch of lunatics that they weren't willing to do it, they could have. Right. They actually really could have thrown. You get rid of that individual mandate, but you keep pre-existing conditions, and suddenly healthcare companies are going to jack up premiums. Or exit exchanges, God knows what happens. But, thankfully, they're too crazy to do that. So, that saved us in the end. They had to go after Medicaid, which is not the popular part, or is the popular part.
That's the popular part.
So
the most unambiguous, no bullshit, simple left part of Obamacare is the most popular part, which should be an enduring lesson for everybody involved in center left or left politics. So real quick though, Cliff, I want you to talk about this. There's a new report out that you sent to me that many county election officials still lack cybersecurity training, and this is just a report by NBC News. And I just want to be clear. They're framing it, and I don't, we could talk about the Russia angle for sure, but the whole issue of voter integrity and voter security predates and transcends Russia. We have a completely chaotic, messed up voting system, which fused with a national campaign on Republicans to suppress the vote of people of color and young people across the country, is an enduring. Let's not say a threat. It's an erosion of democracy.
Right, and let's be honest here. It's a messed up voting system on purpose.
Right.
Because we could fix this in a second, right? If we put the proper resources and we made it a federal responsibility, which in a world where Russia can hack into our voting systems, or could China, or could ISIS, or could any number of different entities and groups. Especially if we're going to keep these voting systems going, some of them in the manner in which they are going via machinery, which I don't think we should. I think we should go back to paper ballots,
definitely,
for safety reasons.
Yes,
but if we're going to keep that, then you need to have this be under the purview of the federal government. Instead, we have purposely left it in the hands of states. Well, why would we do that? Gee, I wonder. I mean, the harder it is to vote, the more one needs to access correct information and jump through hoops. They know that the more likely the people that vote Republican are to be able to jump through those hoops and vote, and then they can get away with, putting the one machine in an African-American neighborhood, which they did for early voting, for example, here in Cincinnati, where some people were online for 4 hours, but can make it very different in the nice white neighborhood. So, the system as it currently is constituted allows for them to suppress many more votes than you'll ever know about, because it's not just the ones who they turn away because they don't have an ID, or because your name is the same as a name of a felon somewhere and they've got a list not allowing felons to vote, but the people who don't want to feel like waiting online for 4 hours and just leave.
And that's such an important point, because we get to, and I'm not even, because I think the reality is, as long as you have, totally unaccountable and messed up voting systems. I mean, the other reality is, like, people say, like, hey, it doesn't need to be an elaborate conspiracy theory by anybody. We have a situation where practically in some cases you literally can't have someone who's just like some, local county chair somewhere. Is it really unbelievable to consider that maybe they might kind of mess around with voting tallies? But before we even get to that point, when people say elections are stolen or rigged, it sort of brings to people's minds these very elaborate kind of conspiracies. The reality is, it's already happening. Each time a African American or Hispanic voter, or any voter that's eligible to vote, that is suppressed because of an ID law, because of the Supreme Court gutting voter, civil rights and voting acts, or because of waiting hours, to me that is a stolen vote. That is suppressed democracy right now. It's happening in real time. The rigging is here.
And it happened in these, beyond whatever Russia did,
yes,
beyond what the Comey letter did, beyond people thinking that that Hillary Clinton was not an inspiring candidate. I'm sorry, you don't just lose 100,000 African American votes in Milwaukee.
No.
I mean, when you know that Scott Walker, who is basically the embodiment of a Koch brothers orgasm. Yes, I know that was disgusting.
That is the most. Every part of that literally made me ill.
Yeah, it is ill. But Scott Walker.
I'm live. Like, I can't take a break after this to put water in my face.
He along with John Husted, who is the Secretary of State in running for governor now of Ohio, and some of these other figures, they made this their key plan, and they did this over a number of years in power. In Scott Walker's case, he a term and a half, I guess, when this election came around, and to think that just 100,000 more just chose not to turn out is ridiculous. And that, of course, is way beyond any margin that Trump won by. And, of course, that affects the fact that a great progressive in Russ Feingold wasn't able to be reelected. Anybody who believes that these things didn't happen, and that doesn't include, people who couldn't get on voting rolls, who just walked away, they're doing it. They are rigging elections right now. And again, so to me, that's the beginning. It's the beginning of the conversation, is that we're not even doing the very basics, as in training people in cybersecurity so they can stop people from hacking in. But that, to me, is sort of a symptom of the much broader problem here, the much broader issue, which is we're not even trying to make sure that there is an equal right to voting among various groups in this country. And it's a serious problem. And to think after what happened in the last election, that the Russians and others who saw what the Russians did, who may have similar interests or other interests, whatever, won't try to get involved in affecting our elections, is just to be naive.
Hopefully, China will rig it for our side in the next election.
That's true.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. The best bet is that the Chinese are like, I think we want the Democrats back in power. I think we can override a Russian hacking program. Let's do this.
That's what we need to do. Democrats out there, if you're listening to this, and Michael Brooks is instructing you, kiss up to the Chinese government.
Team China.
Do you know what China's ancient foreign policy was called? I love this factoid. They used to call it barbarian management.
See?
And they need to manage. That was the first thing I thought of when Trump was elected. I was like,
on that post?
We're going to need some barbarian management, man. But Cliff, my last question though about this, and this just, it opens up a kind of broader point that I just want your thoughts on before we wrap up. Every time we talk about Republicans, even with all of the, and there is the chink in their armor is when they actually have to govern in some ways, because so much of this is designed for opposition. But on the other hand, when you look at how, I think this is the other big problem with the sort of aimlessness of the Democratic Party, and why some version of an actual progressive agenda needs to be implemented because at least it's synchronized. You know, Republicans, it works across the board. You get the donations from the Koch brothers. People are elected in office to do them favors, you know, give them tax cuts and deregulate their industries. And then you appoint people to courts that suppress Democratic voters, that then make, that then penalize labor unions. Like it all works and mutually reinforces.
Sure.
And then with us, for decades, it's like, well, we do a little bit of an investment here, but then maybe we're also anti-labor union. You know, we're going to have a party in power that implements legislation that, regardless of other specifics you get in, but even things like NAFTA or TPP, they're bad for and damaging a vital part of the vote infrastructure of our party. So even in a purely operational sense, it's not strategic and it's not coherent. And I feel, and at some point, like, Democrats need to, and that's the weird thing, because that's where, like, the kind of another problem with the technocrats is that they're off on, like, well, I don't, debating the minutia of what a TPP job numbers result's going to be. And it's like, no, you're
that's also
hurting your whole,
well, you're lacking a narrative.
Exactly.
People respond.
Yes.
We tell each other, we humans, and we tell stories, and we respond emotionally to that. It doesn't mean you don't need facts. You do. You need numbers. You need facts. You need history. These things are relevant.
Right.
But we need to tell stories, and stories are told in narratives. This is who we are. This is what we're going to do for you. It's why you should vote for us. It's the other guys will do just the opposite. It's why you shouldn't vote for them. And the reason why Republicans are generally better at just blocking and not governing, I mean, part of it's because they've bought into all this voodoo and none of their governing works. But also, being conservative means mostly you want to block stuff from happening, whereas we want to actually make things happen to make the world a better place. And if you're going to do that, you need a coherent narrative as to why that should happen and how you're going to get it done. And there's no doubt we need to do better about that. I mean, we do.
And policy-wise, because the policy feeds the story. And I would just add, I agree with that 100%, but I think that even in some ways, because this iteration of Republicans, they're revolutionary. They don't just they want to block positive things, and they actually want to do tremendous social uprooting to,
That's a good point.
If you destroy Social Security and Medicare, that is a radical thing to do. It is a complete uprooting of our social compact. So I'm a left, so I want single payer and all the rest of it. But if you were a proper paid up, and this doesn't exist in anything but people's fantasy life now. But if you were like one of these, I read Michael Oakeshott and I want to, gradually change society, you wouldn't want to touch Medicare or Social Security because those are already inbuilt parts of our social compact.
No,
so these people are revolutionaries in a certain way.
Conservative in the sense, you're right, of actually conservative, like small c conservative, would mean protecting the institutions in place and trying to gradually improve them.
Right.
It means, and that would be Social Security and Medicare, just the way it would have been that Obamacare was the conservative option.
Exactly.
To improve health care.
Totally.
It was to take what we had, system we had, build on that, and improve it, which it did. But it wasn't like it wasn't the left version. It was that's why
it was the center right conservative version. It's just undeniable. Well, Cliff, I appreciate.
And that's not to say it didn't improve a lot of people's lives, which it did.
Yes.
And I'm happy about that. But let's move to the next phase.
Let's move to phase 2. Cliff Schecter.
Phase 2, baby.
Phase 2. That's right. Appreciate your time as always, buddy. Hope to talk to you at plenty of places soon.
All right. Me too, buddy. Take care. Have a good weekend.
You too, man. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. We are going to do we have a Jimmy Reefer cake situation? Let's play that for the fun half. We are going to come back with film guy Matthew.
Have you never heard Lobotomized!
Welcome back to the Majority Report. Joining us now is my good friend, film guy Matthew Weiss. But before he can open his mouth, you need to open your ears and listen to his song.
Matthew, the film guy, is choosing your streams. Cassavetes on Netflix and other such themes. Maybe you'll watch one and learn a few things. Please recommend me a movie to stream. Matthew, please recommend me a movie to stream. Matthew, film guy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, did you have a similar version for your bat mitzvah song?
First of all, it's bar mitzvah. I am a boy.
Bor.
But
Bah.
at my bar mitzvah, I was more into like NXS and the Fat Boys, so I hadn't quite gotten there yet.
Fair enough. So, Matthew, what's going on, man? You had a birthday recently, right? And by the way, where were you? Usually, I actually am with you on your birthday.
I know you usually are, but I took it low key this year. I'm back and forth in and out of town a lot this month for some corporate gigs I've been doing, so I've just decided to keep it local. Just had my lovely fiance Mary. She took me out to a nice fancy dinner, and we just kind of kept it low key. You know, it's my second 21st birthday, so
congratulations.
Thank you. I wanted to do the opposite of your usual 21st birthday bacchanalia. So I just had a good meal, and we went home and watched some movies together. We've been on a David Lynch kick around here lately, so we've just been keeping it.
What did you do for your 21st birthday?
You know what? I barely even remember what I did for it, because I was living in Tallahassee at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think I went to the movies with my girlfriend at the time. I think I also kept it pretty non-traditional.
Did you make out, or was it like some art house movie and you needed to focus?
I was 21. Of course I made out. We made out in every movie.
Of course I made out. Of course I did.
Of course. No. I don't know. I really don't remember. Isn't that sad? I remember friends. You know, actually, I wasn't really an alcohol guy at 21. It took me a few years.
Took you a little longer, yeah. Because now you are, for sure.
I mean, now I enjoy a drink here and there, but I wouldn't even say I'm a regular drinker either. You know, there's a bottle of bourbon in the cupboard at all times.
Well, that's very Jewish, right?
It is, actually. My parents did not drink at all. My dad was a zero
No, I was
alcohol
thinking
guy.
the bourbon. Like a lot of Jews drink bourbon for some reason, yeah.
I grew up a lot of teetotaling Jews personally. I mean, not my generation, but all my parents and grandparents. I didn't really have any. The only drinker that preceded me was my grandfather, who died at 60 of like his fifth heart attack. So he really lived it out to the furthest.
He lived it to the
wall
max.
there.
I remember.
Definitely.
When I turned 21, I went to college like in the middle of nowhere, so you didn't really need like a fake ID situation, because it was just basically dorm parties. But occasionally, like when I'd go to like Boston or New York, occasionally try to like get into some, and they would, they were very intense about IDs, and it never worked. But it just wasn't. It didn't happen enough in order to warrant getting a fake one. And when I turned 21, I went into Manhattan and with a couple of people, including one other friend who has the exact same birthday as me, like same date, same day, same year. And we went to this, and we pre-gamed somewhere, and then we went to this club, and they just waved us in. And I was like so ready to like slap down my license, like, have my my Joseph Campbell like initiation, and they were just like, "Yeah, go in, go ahead." I was like, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
And also like, "What the hell? Why didn't I come to this? Why didn't I come to this club before? Like, you know, like what the?
Yes.
Yeah, it was very frustrating. It was
Very
almost
confusing,
like
very
the bouncer knew. Like he just literally like smirked and just was like, "Yep, come in."
That's right. It was more Joseph Campbell than you even expected because he just completely mind-fucked you.
Yeah, he did. He totally like Obi-Wan'd me. So
when you do not want to drink, may you drink.
Right, exactly. So when you're out of town on these corporate gigs, what does that mean?
I'm doing a series of promotional videos for W Hotel, so they're doing little spots at different places. We went to Miami Beach, we went to LA.
Nice.
This weekend actually is here in New York. Then we're going to Chicago. So, yeah, it's good.
When are you going to be in Chicago?
I think in 3 weeks.
Okay, I'm going to be in Chicago in September myself. Maybe we'll.
Oh yeah, what are you doing there?
I'm doing some Dope Boys stuff.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we're both in a similar lark there. Would you like a Peter Thiel voiceover for any of these?
I don't know.
Come to the W Hotel that's slightly less gross than the other places. Still, you'll probably die.
Yeah.
It'd be great if you could do like a taxonomy of like the different like room rates, and then Peter Thiel could tell you at what rate you will be killed to extract your blood, depending on what rooms you can afford.
4 pints to stay here, 50 pints to stay here.
What was the movie you recommended last time?
I believe last time I recommended, wait a second, see, because now I have my handy-dandy chart. If everyone goes to imdb.com and does a search for Matthew Film Guide, they will find my exhaustive list of all the films that I've recommended on this spot. It was Punishment Park, the pseudo-documentary about the hippies who get sentenced to run through the desert being chased by the National Guard for their crimes against the state.
Oh, I do want to see that. I can't believe I haven't gotten to that yet. Was that one that we discovered? Was that like available on YouTube?
Yeah, I think it's a YouTuber because it came out on Criterion DVD, but I don't think any. Actually, no. Didn't somebody tell me that now all of Criterion DVDs are streaming at the library?
Yes, at the New York City Public Library. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a great place to find movies, including probably most of the 74 or 5 that I've recommended up until now.
Is there any like director that have sort of, Oscar buzz prestige in this sort of, in the mainstream kind of white bread, middle brow way that you would sort of turn your nose up with your deep cinematic sophistication? Is there any of these people that you have that like you would give any props to?
No, I don't think so. Well, that's not totally true. I mean, it depends on what you're going for.
I'm curious. So a movie to me like Moonlight, like that to me, I was shocked by how good that was. Like, is there anything? Because I don't have anywhere near your knowledge or sophistication, but I just have that general like, I don't really like that. That's boring. Like I'm just hypercritical. So a lot of stuff But Moonlight came along, and I was like, wow, and it's not particularly sophisticated filmmaking. It's kind of like a play on screen, but it's very well written. It's incredibly well acted, and it was like, oh, okay, well, this is a movie that it was kind of like The Wire in the sense, or The Sopranos. It was like, all right, sometimes things get traction in popular culture, and they're actually really good.
Yeah, I look. I actually haven't seen Moonlight yet. It's on my short list of recent movies to see, but I really loved the director's his first film, Medicine for Melancholy, which I felt had the emotional sophistication of the kind of movie that, like what you would say, I give props to. It doesn't need to be necessarily this hyper sort of cutting edge visual aesthetic. That's not necessarily my bag.
Right.
I'm looking for your vision of the world, for your kind of conception of humanity, and is it something that's kind of just flattering and easy to make everyone in the audience feel smart and cool and arty for absorbing and I'm sophisticated, or is it something that's a little more challenging, a little more willing to implicate the audience and to require a little bit more from the viewer than just to kind of be spoon-fed a kind of a shorthand way of seeing your life. And I thought Medicine for Melancholy, even though it kind of fell into the mumblecore kind of rubric, had a lot of
I do not like that stuff.
Subtlety, and had a lot of. I mean, I actually like a lot of that stuff, but only the ones that I think actually are, using their kind of commercial alienation to the fullest extent, and not just trying to do a kind of low budget version of Hollywood thinking, Hollywood movies. That you can get a lot of that too at that level.
Right.
So I guess I can't really speak to Moonlight specifically, even though I'm definitely going to see it, and I'm glad that it was a movie made for like $1 million, which is like zero in Hollywood terms, and it won a very prestigious amongst that crowd award. So I wouldn't. That's not peanuts. That's not nothing. I consider that an achievement, even though it's true, as we say every year, the Oscars are just a trade show for the movie industry, so
I can't remember the last time. I haven't looked at. I mean, I haven't watched an Oscars in ages. Matt, did you have something you wanted to add? Something?
Well, not really add. I wanted to change the subject entirely.
That's fine.
That's okay. I wanted to ask Matthew. We've got a break coming up this next week, and I don't watch a lot of film, but I wanted to watch some sort of historical. Like I'm going to watch
Game of Thrones.
There Will Be Blood. Yeah, history.
Yeah, Game of Thrones.
You do like history, so you'll watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah, exactly. But like not sort of that sort of history, but American history, so closer to home. I was curious if you had any general thoughts on sort of film history or period pieces in general, and if you have any recommendations.
Well, it depends.
I guess
on what
in
era
addition,
you're going for.
19th century America.
19th century America. Well, I'm going to have to give that a thinker, because there's nothing that comes right off the top of my head. I mean, what actually is interesting is since films themselves have been made since the early 20th century, there's a lot of history captured even in the dramatic films that necessarily at the time weren't period pieces.
Right.
I don't know if you ever watched Meet John Doe. That's one of the ones I've recommended before. I think that's an amazing movie about the kind of history of how fascism was understood in this country, and that was made in 1941. That's one I can recommend with no qualms whatsoever. Go back and look at my list, because there's some other ones on there. It's maybe not American history, but The Grand Illusion by Jean Renoir, about the German POW camp with French soldiers captured. That's another amazing historical film that I think you would probably get some buzz off of from your history buzz side of your brain. But I'll give that a think, man.
Matthew, can I? Because we're gonna get to your actual pick for a week in the second, and I hope it was specifically tailored for talking to me. But I am actually curious. I don't know how to phrase this question, but is there if there was a doorway into watching the kind of films that you recommend, that would be something that would sort of develop somebody's palate? What would that movie, or conversely, if there's one movie that probably people have not seen, but you really wish that you could sort of enlist a Maoist force to force everybody to watch it, what would that movie be?
In this chair,
yeah,
watch this
sit
movie.
down. Film guy Matthew, he's a very nice Jewish boy. I'm going to give him LASIK so he doesn't get wiped out when we take over the fucking country. And you watch this movie. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, look, I can only really speak to my own kind of development as a film guy, and I know that there's been a lot of people who've taken a similar trail.
Right.
For me, it started with a movie like Harold and Maude, which is one of those 70s Hollywood kind of anomalies that in that era was allowed to be made with somewhat of a bigger budget.
Okay, can you give me a detour for a second? Why do the 70s, clearly there was genuinely good movies made in the Hollywood system?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, it was a blip in the system. You know, the story basically goes, and if you read that book that we've talked about before, Easy Riders and the Raging Bulls, it goes on to talk about how by the end of the 60s, the counterculture, the baby boomers who would come up, were kind of enigmas to the powers that be, the old men trying to make money. And this was true in the music business too. They were unclear as to where to go to kind of capture this audience. And they used examples of movies like Paint Your Wagon, which was like this Western musical, to just show how completely bonkers they had gone trying to kind of capture the popular sentiment. Right. And they turned to the first generation of film brats, these kids who had grown up kind of going to film school for the first time, really. And that was the 70s. They kind of handed the keys to Hollywood over to these kids in their 20s, which is, you know, your rogues gallery of big names. Coppola, Scorsese, Spielberg, Lucas, you know, and other guys like Hal Ashby, who made Harold and Maude, were allowed to do kind of things that you wouldn't have thought could have gotten by necessarily. They were highly influenced by the European cinema of the 50s and 60s, which had gotten a lot of acclaim worldwide. The French New Wave was a big influence on them, which came out of the 60s. And it just lasted from somewhere around the early 70s until the famous kind of mega flops of Gates of Heaven, which was Michael Cimino, who he made the Deer Hunter. There's a lot of these guys came out in that 70s era, and it was just like a perfect storm of actually artistically adventurous and kind of personal filmmaking meeting the commercial cinema.
And then in the 80s, it's almost like it parallels with Reagan. It just become like garbage.
Well,
other than Eddie Murphy movies, because I like Eddie Murphy.
All right, well, we'll give you that.
It's just interesting that that drop.
Jaws and Star Wars basically made them realize, like, oh, whoa, we don't need to be trying so hard to make these movies. I mean, even if you look at the normal Hollywood movies of the 40s and 50s, they were emotionally complex. They were like mature adult stories to a certain extent. You know, it was movies like The Apartment with Jack Lemmon. That would be like a Mumblecore movie today, basically. Right. You know, it's just not. There's no action. It's very kind of day-to-day human drama. You know, so they realized in the 80s they didn't have to try that hard to just make money. You know, they could just do special effects. They could do action adventure. They could do bigger spectacle. So the blockbuster mentality took over, and that's when you get also the kind of great American independent film movement in basically in the 80s and the 90s, and basically today it's been almost completely wiped out. But in a way, it only its commercial viability is wiped out because we have such an atomization of ways to see movies that there are those very low budget movies you can get on iTunes that you never hear about because there's not enough money to spend on advertising. And then you just get Spider-Man movies and adventure movies.
Right. There's no. It's kind of like everything else. There's no room for that sort of middle lane. All right. Well, Matthew.
Yeah, that's what's happened. That's what's happened.
That's really well. And that parallels from the middle class to film production. So what?
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
So what are we watching this week? And I will watch some of these on vacation next week. I promise. I do watch your picks sometimes, and they're great.
That's great. That's great. Sometimes it's better than no times.
Well, I think we all know who's no times because.
Yeah, Sam is no times.
I'm having a dispute on Twitter about Jimmy Dore, so I don't have time.
That's much more important.
Do you see?
That's much more important.
Because someone with three followers told me that Social Security might be better off under Trump, and I'm going to argue with him for 45 minutes. God damn it!
I honestly think Sam and I have talked about this before, but the same thing about like eBay. I do the eBay thing to get that little buzz. Just that constant little dopamine feedback you get from checking your Twitter and your Facebook.
Yep.
That is a very potent drug, and I can admit to even having that. That's even interrupted the time I have or the patience I have to watch movies these days. And believe me, that's a disturbing prospect. So you have to really set some time aside to do these things. I think it's important. Yeah. I know sometimes I feel like the school marm tisking the kids, but I can tell you it goes for me too. You know, needing to have that kind of meditation time.
It is. I think it's but I think actually in an odd way, anything that is sort of prolonged focus is not
Right.
meditation, but it almost is a meditative experience in the context of today's
Yeah.
attention span.
Let's just say it touches on some of the same muscles in the brain,
Right.
if you will. You
Yep.
know, and they're atrophying the more you're just like, what do you say now? What
Yeah.
do you say now?
Yeah.
Ding, I got a new thing. You know.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I agree. It's
all
a
right.
problem.
So with that
Yeah.
in mind, I'm going to recommend a movie that is not necessarily difficult to pay attention to. It's actually kind of bewildering in a lot of ways, but it is. You asked for like, what is one of those movies that really kind of cracked my head open?
Right.
On this road to film guy Matthew-dom.
Yes.
It was John Cassavetes' A Woman Under the Influence.
A Woman Under the Influence by John Cassavetes. Okay.
Now we can talk hours about John Cassavetes. Reading a book on him when I was 19 basically was a major fork in the road for me, not just as a film guy, but just as like a person, just kind of understanding what I want from life and what I want from art, basically. You know,
Mhm.
up until then, movies I thought were just supposed to be cool and funny and like,
Check.
I don't know.
Check.
you know, like serious and neat.
Right.
But I never actually thought they could be like life changing. And I know that's kind of an overused kind of word or phrase, but the kind of soul searing, like, oh my God, like they're exposing something about me that's embarrassing to me to see them doing.
Right.
You know, so this is one of the most personal films ever made in Hollywood, and it's an independent film. Cassavetes used money from the actors, which is Peter Falk, one of his frequent collaborators, or at least multiple time collaborators, and his wife Jenna Rollins, the actress who he's made several films with. And this is kind of like the middle of his marriage trilogy. He did one called Minnie and Moskowitz, which is kind of about the falling in love, madcap kind of romance, even though in his own way it's dark and brooding and bizarre. And he did one called Faces, which was actually his second film, which is about a couple breaking up. But Woman Under the Influence is basically, on the surface, it's about Jenna Rollins' character, Mabel, who is kind of you don't know if she's crazy or you don't know if she's just kind of eccentric. And it's basically a pseudo biography of Cassavetes and his inability to kind of deal with normality. And it has a lot, it got misunderstood as kind of a feminist movie, but Cassavetes was not interested in making political points. He was basically about these kind of, how should I say this? These kind of, you can't pin down his kind of imaginative stance to the world. It's order disrupting. He's shocking in his behavior, and it got kind of painted with a broad brush as Mabel is this neglected, underappreciated housewife, but really she's much more deep than that. She's kind of just like she's a whirling dervish in this family, and her only real desire is to be loved and to love her family. And I don't really want to say too much more than that about the plot because it kind of it's unencapsulatable, but it is one of the most personal, embarrassing, kind of implicating yourself. If you can identify with Mabel, it's one of the most personal movies ever made. And it's sometimes it's infuriating. Sometimes she does things that you don't want her to do, so to speak. It's kind of politically incorrect in some ways. You'll be tempted to want to project your own kind of feminist or kind of humanist intentions to the way she's treated by her husband.
I will tell you, Mabel was not politically correct. She was not.
Yeah,
she wasn't. We don't have time for it, folks. She's a whirling dervish.
In the best way. Best way. I hate that Donald Trump is taken over our use of the word politically incorrect as a pejorative, but this is a movie that goes beyond just not caring about other people's perceptions of a certain social group. It's I can only put it in the way of that it's an extremely personal movie.
Wow.
And personal truths are always the challenging of political or systemic truths.
Right. Well, and then how do we synchronize those? That's an interesting question. Film Guy Matthew,
Yeah.
I'll watch this. I'll watch the other ones. And I hope to see you soon. Thanks so much, man.
My pleasure, buddy. Take care.
All right.
Anytime.
Talk to you soon, brother. Okay, everybody, we have a song from Jimmy Reefer Cake. Is that correct, Matt? I'm going to give you a second. I'm going to call, the phone's down. I'll just call in while you're looking for it. 646-257-3920. We have a couple pieces of sound. The IMs are on. I'm going to take a few phone calls, and we're actually going to be out of here by 2 today. So not the usual incredibly long thought and a half. There are brand new shows, I believe, every day next week.
No public show Thursday.
No public show
Members
Thursday.
only.
So membership has its privileges. And then there's the Labor Day show, which I believe is a montage of different labor speeches and things that honor the, obviously the essential contributions of labor unions and their contribution to the struggle for a better world. And tonight, catch us live streaming 6 p.m. The Michael Brooks Show. Subscribe to Majority Report on iTunes. Become a member of Majority Report today at majority.fm/become a member. Subscribe to Michael Brooks Show on iTunes. Go to Michael Brooks, patreon.com/TMBS. Use the Majority Report kickback page, Amazon and Jet. Call. Lines are open. We're ready for you. The IMs are on. We'll see you in the fun half. And right now, what's the name of this Jimmy Reefer Cake selection?
That fascist named Fred.
All right, Jimmy. I'll see how long this lasts, buddy.
That fascist talks a lot about the white man's victimization and whatnot. The rally is pretty small. Fred says it's because white civilization's about to fall. Antifa found the place and they came up here to get in his face of that fascist named Fred. But nothing in the world can change the mind of that fascist named Fred. No, no. Nothing in the world can change the mind of that fascist named Fred. That fascist named Fred. Antifa hit him with a stick. They punched him in the face and they punched him right in the dick. The rally was pretty small, but the fights were so bloody that now it's getting the most attention of all. They thought Fred would end up a paraplegic, and now it looks like Fred will be dead. That fascist. And now they hold a rally waving signs that say Fred is dead. No, he's a martyr for the fascists because now poor Fred is dead. That fascist named Fred. From his nightmare, Fred woke up dead. It's just a story his mind made up. He's lonely, psychotic and mad, and he dreams of Antifa and how he wants to hurt them real bad. He grabs his gun, he thinks he's gonna need it. This time Fred hopes someone else will be dead. That crazy motherfucking fascist named Fred. Nothing in the world can change the mind of the fascist named Fred. Nothing in the world can change the mind of the fascist. I say nothing in the world can change the mind of the fascist. Nothing in the world can change the mind of the fascist. Nothing in the world can change the mind of the fascist. Nothing in the world can change the mind of the fascist. Nothing in the world can change the mind of the fascist. Nothing in the world can change the mind of the fascist. That fascist named Fred.
Okay. Let me see.
So I think a cautionary tale against Antifa.
Sounds like a cautionary tale against Antifa. I
I
guess
don't
a
agree
general
that the,
call to oppose violence. I guess that's nice. Whatever.
I don't agree with the I don't agree with the notion that that it was a smaller rally. I think there was a lot of people on that Friday night.
Yeah, that was a pretty big rally, and it was a pretty big thing for our country.
It was going to get attention
I do think
regardless.
we're getting
of
into
Antifa.
a new sort of era of a different type of false equivalency, which again can oppose violence, but if you think there's any equivalent violence between a fascist and Antifa, whoosh, that's a problem. We're in the fun half now. Is that correct? All right, let's go to Finnegan's Wake. We will be right back with the fun half. 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. IMs are on. See you on the flip side.
Think of all the times she said no, 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 no. Like to speak my mind. She said no, 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 no. And I know her time's not free. She didn't waste none on me. Situation sad. She said no, 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 no. Things are looking bad. She said no, 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 no. And if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. Every time I see her look my way, I don't know, girl, what to say. Situation sad. She said no, 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 no. Things are looking bad. She said no, 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 no. And if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no.
Welcome back. Welcome back on the fun half. Michael Brooks, Matt Leck. You're calling from a 603 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
It's Ashley from Northampton.
Hey, what's going on, Ashley? What's on your mind?
Oh, many things, but I was thinking, I don't know if you have an opinion. You seem to have several opinions about Glenn Greenwald and The Intercept, and I've been a little disappointed lately. I was very excited because they seem to have a really interesting perspective, but then they kind of just bungled it, and they didn't say much about Charlottesville immediately, and then I was wondering what you think about the whole...
I haven't, honestly, I don't read every Intercept or Greenwald column, but I think that they do great reporting. Glenn Greenwald is on point on a lot of national security issues, but I do think that he is not... I would not give the interview that he gave to Tucker Carlson when he filled in for Jeremy Scahill on his podcast. And I do think that Glenn Greenwald sometimes is, I don't understand how he can be so smart and so ruthless and so on point when it comes to the foreign policy establishment, when it comes to certain Democratic leaders, and then at the same time kind of, to me, waver or not hit people or hit stories like Charlottesville with the same precision. And I think I also just, have genuine disagreements with him about like what my priorities are. And that's fine. But I haven't, I can't talk specifically about what they wrote about Charlottesville because I haven't followed, which is kind of illustrative in and of itself. Like I read the Intercept on reporting on Yemen. I read the Intercept on national security stuff. I read the Intercept on corporate influence peddling. But they're writing on things like Charlottesville. That wouldn't even be a place that I would honestly even turn to. So maybe that says something right there.
Well, I was reading a lot of Intercept even before I started watching the Majority Report, and I just was thinking, he is so smart. I just thought maybe he had some very valid points, but then, you know what, he doesn't turn out sounding very leftist. He sounds like very middle of the road sometimes. Yeah. And then that began to kind of bother me. And then Jeremy Scahill seems even more leftist of him, but he
I think
also
Jeremy's
didn't write
more left,
something about
yes.
Charlottesville immediately.
I think Jeremy has different politics than Glenn. I think Glenn is a lefty libertarian, and I think that, Scahill is a straight up leftist, and maybe Charlottesville is just less his beat. But honestly, I'm going to look that stuff up and look more at it. Maybe I'll touch on it later on the other show. I appreciate the call. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So a lot of conservative politics is driven by various forms of very weird and very deep sexual neurosis. Obviously, there's a massive amount of homophobia. There's a massive amount of transphobia. There's basic misogyny. And it comes in a lot of different varieties. Maybe it's people suppressing their sexual desires. Maybe it's people uncomfortable with the pace of change in society. And then other times it might just be good old-fashioned, not so deep, very basic, Jesus Christ, this guy needs to get laid. And that brings us to really my favorite libertarian radio show host, Wayne Allen Root. This is a picture of him, very 80s style, though it's today. He's got a red power tie on. I don't know what kind of car he's sitting in front of.
It's a Maserati.
That's a Maserati. In some type of upscale house. I don't know if this is true, but the feeling I have about this guy is that this is like, he rented the car and the house for like an hour for a photo shoot type of thing, and he probably, I'm sure he's on his grift. I doubt he's struggling, but I'm not sure he's quite thriving this much. We have some new sound of him and more of his deep insight about gender, sex, and the same. This is the guy who talked about Megyn Kelly, and the whole subtext was, wow, this guy has probably done a sort of extraordinary amount of self-pleasuring to Megyn Kelly. So let's listen to this latest from Wayne Allen Root.
Don't know what to say. They've never met a real man before. That was the way liberals treated me at Columbia University, I was a real guy's guy and a football player, and I show up at Columbia, and everybody's a wussy. A liberal, spoiled brat, lucky sperm club, pussycat. That's what they all are. And they don't know how to fight, and they don't know how to argue, except in weird liberal kind of ways. And they hate anything that anyone who has money, anyone who has power, anyone who owns a business. And then when you say to them, wait a minute, you're a little rich spoiled brat from Great Neck, New York. I'll bet your parents are rich. Your parents own a business. Yeah, they do. And what do you want to do with them? Oh, I want to take all their money away too. Well, that's convenient to say, but you lived on their money for the last 18, 19, 20 years. Now that you're at Columbia University, you're living on their money still. You live on their money because you're never going to win, so no one's ever going to take their money away, and you know it. So you're just saying that because you're a guy and there's women in the room and you want to have sex. That's all it comes down to. That was the only reason that Bill Clinton ever attended all those peace stick rallies and smoked pot. These are all, it's all BS is what it is. All these liberal guys, they just want to win over women and look like a proud peacock in front of women because they know that liberal women want to hear this nonsense. Oh my God, all I care about is poor people. That's all I care about is poor people. And then they know tonight they're going to have sex with some stupid liberal woman who's ugly in the first place, because all liberal women are.
Can we replay that sound later on my show? I will say, Wayne has a point here. If you ever, as a young person dating in a place like Brooklyn, and you just go to some bar or club or whatever, and the music is low enough, and I know Matt can attest to this too, there will be a row. Say there's like 3-4 tables. You're on a date, and the person next to you is on a date, and there's a date. The amount of noise that we make as men when we're like, I just care so much about poor people. And then watching the woman that we're talking to, all of whom just disgusting, incredibly ugly, getting like red and flushed in the face with just sort of rabid sexual desire, as we talk about in this, and not just talk about how we care about poor people, but we have a high pitch whine. Wayne's on there. What I love is the fusion of the fact that it's pure projection, because Wayne Allen Root still clearly is like,
his entire persona is about getting Wayne Allen Root laid.
Yes. Like, please, somebody ironically act socialist and give Wayne Allen Root like at least, a cop a feel on the guy. It's getting critical. And the other part that's hilarious is that he manages to promote a political vision when he's not complaining about never getting laid, that would subconsciously complaining about never getting laid, whose literally sole purpose is to ensure that the children of the hyper wealthy get money handed to them. That's like it. He resents the fuck out of those people, but all he does is carry water for them on his silly radio show when he's not bizarrely complaining about not getting laid. So, Wayne Allen Root, sad.
He's also the guy who said something about if you need to own a cat so liberal women will date you or something, or liberal women who own cats. Do you remember this? I don't know. I
feel like Wayne Allen Root really digs. Like, I think that
he wants a liberal
wants a liberal woman. I think that sometimes if you walked by like the Park Slope Food Co-op, you might see him lurking around in a raincoat, trying to scope out like an NPR producer or something. We're on to you, Wayne. I don't even think he really thought that Megyn Kelly was attractive. I think he's more of a Brooke Gladstone kind of a guy. You're not good enough for them, Wayne. Just accept it. Or reform yourself. You're calling from a 207 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey.
Hey.
Hey, Brooksy. What's up, buddy?
Hey. Is this my
Reefer Cake.
Jimmy Reefer Cake, songwriter, Twitter provocateur, sometimes stalker of me, and podcast host, Jimmy Reefer Cake. How are you, buddy?
You're just a small part of it, sir. Like, the big picture is about this whole battle about hypocrisy. Okay, so
right, man.
Sometimes you guys talk about hypocrisy, blow it off. Oh, Brooksy, I heard you talking to that kind of douchebag Australian accent guy.
That's my friend Josh.
You got into this.
Yeah, but that's funny. That's
yeah, man. It was pretty.
Douchebag Australian accent guy. Okay.
Yeah, and you had that same point though in the argument. At one point, you were like, power is what matters, and he's like, hypocrisy is better. Oh no, power, hypocrisy.
All right, dude, you got to get to the point.
Explain
Okay, come on.
Okay,
man.
No, I'm loving the Sandler bid. Keep going.
Yeah, not the Sandler bit. Do the point.
I'm plugging your appearance. All right, get to the song. I talked about my song I sent in today.
You make it sound really good.
Off track.
Yes.
So the song today, first of all, Matt, buddy, I didn't say this song was about Charlottesville at all. Of course it wasn't. I said the rally was small.
The historical moment.
It's about a small rally.
On, Jimmy.
But, my friend, these rallies have been going on for months, and the police tend to seem to let people just beat each other up, which makes a YouTube sensation. And then all these like little douchebag, conservative, little alt-right. That's what they are, right? They have their little YouTube channels, and all they're playing is pictures of Antifa, like dressed up, all fucked up. So
they will always do that.
What I was talking about. What's that?
They will always do that. That's an activity of the far right throughout history, is finding things to be aggrieved about.
Yeah, exactly. And like in the song, the point I'm making is that these people, like Fred, is psychotic. He didn't actually get killed, or it was in his mind.
No one's been killed by Antifa.
He's already got. What's that?
No one's been killed by Antifa like Fred. And the hypothetical in your story hasn't actually happened.
Of course not.
Right.
In my story, he didn't get killed either. He woke up and it was his own fantasy that he was a victim of Antifa. Right? In my song, that's the thing. You go to dumbdumbleft.org, and you'll find actually really smart people are there.
Okay. All right, Jimmy. Thanks for the call, man. Thanks for the call, bro.
Yeah, good luck.
Take care, man.
Gotcha.
Website must be going well. He's feeling himself.
Yeah, he's feeling it. You're calling from a 717 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
This is Death Camp for Kulak.
Dude, how you doing, man?
Not bad. So I was actually calling about Jimmy's song.
Oh, Jesus.
I'll be quick. Basically, yeah. It's the only thing is for me is like the same thing that happened with the Hillary election, right? Like it seems like these people tend to, if it's Trump and there's going to be racism elevated, it seems like they kind of ignore that and they just say, well, Hillary's bad, right?
Right.
And it's like,
sure.
Antifa is taking a serious, stance against racism and fascism in the country. And it seems like a lot of white dudes have to, kind of criticize them and then do nothing about it themselves.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think like what I've said, I mean, I'm feeling like a broken record at this point. It's something I want to research more. And I mean, look, to be really, I mean, here's first and foremost. It's kind of going back actually to what I said about the black bloc during the inauguration. I'm not going to go out and tell other people with a platform, like it's a trivial example, but like the young woman that called yesterday, she talked about going to Russia. And I think you should ask somebody beyond me, obviously. But I feel comfortable saying like, because I would go. I would happily take a trip to Russia, right? I'm not doing black bloc stuff and I'm not doing Antifa stuff, so I don't want to tell other people to do something that I'm not doing. And I'm open to a debate about it. But any debate where I draw the line sharply is if you cannot understand, you can say, I oppose violence as a strategy. Okay, let's talk about it. But if you're just saying violence is bad as a category, and you don't recognize the fundamental difference between violence on behalf of fascism and Nazism versus violence on behalf of defeating and fighting fascism and Nazism, then you don't, again, you're just not equipped to have the conversation. You're making a total fundamental category error. And a lot of the people you're talking about, have this very warped sense of violence and not violence, and they don't have any context for it. And it does look like they're absolutely minimizing the real crisis, which is not Antifa is not the problem. It may not be the right solution, but it is in no way the problem. And I hope people can understand that.
Well, I
difference.
think it represents people who have privilege, doing what they can.
That's right, and that's always a good thing.
And for me, it's a little bit. It seems almost like with Hillary, it was never an issue of like, oh, I'm too proud to vote for Hillary, so Trump can happen because I'm white and it's not going to directly affect me, right?
Yep.
But if it's and the same mentality that people like that use it to go against Antifa, which is like you said just a minute ago, that basically the right will always find a way to kind of feel aggrieved and find some martyr sword that they can die on that doesn't even exist, right? But the idea that people are going to criticize this, it's like there are other things to criticize. I mean, if you don't like that, well, sorry, it's a historical strategy. It's not like
that's right.
The reason that historical movements did not use violence or they were nonviolent is because they didn't need violence. They had mass mobilization, they had mass movement.
Right.
But in a situation like this, I mean, historically, this is how this goes, and I just feel like the criticism comes from a place of just, I don't know if it's just
It comes from
or-
it comes from people for whom this is just about words and ideas.
Yes.
It's not about people that are actually in physical space. Like if there were, if somebody had a perspective when they're going to like Black Lives Matter marches or anti-fascist marches or counter protests, and they said that the violence, and they were always there and putting their body on the line, and they said like there were sort of violent agitators that need to be criticized in Antifa, I would listen to that.
Right.
When it's people who are just sitting on a YouTube channel saying like we need to consider all ideas, it's complete bullshit.
It's complete bullshit. And, you know, Cornel West said, and I have infinitely more interest in what Cornel West has to say about this than, you know, anybody who's blabbering on Twitter or YouTube about this stuff, that Antifa was there saving and protecting his life. That speaks for itself. And you're absolutely right.
There's not all violent. It's not like Antifa is only violent.
Not at all.
The idea that like they use violence as a tool does not mean that they are wholly, you know, people who are involved with that movement, medics, people who are, you know, interested in protecting people. It's not just violence. It's not just these people come to get in fights. I think probably most people don't like getting in fights, right? But the idea that you do not allow, you know, people to intimidate you with violence, you know, it's matching up force, right? I get a little annoyed when I, you know, hear people like it was the same thing with Trump. I'm white. It's not going to affect me. I don't feel compelled to go vote because I'm privileged. And Antifa, I'm white. It's easy to sit back and criticize something and frankly, I don't want to point fingers and say people don't do things, but I mean, you know, what is your alternative then? Instead of sitting back and picking an easy target to criticize, how are you going to help stop?
And even why is that even what you're criticizing right now? Like I mean, like the idea that Antifa is how it is on anybody's radar.
It's a priority of racists.
It's a priority of racists. It's a priority of fascists. And by the way,
aren't they just feeding into the narrative? They're feeding into the narrative from the right. They are feeding into a narrative.
Every time we talk about
this agreement is actually serious, and we, you know, the right is somehow being targeted. It literally is an equal response to violence coming from the right, and that is it.
That's 100% right, and it's what Matt explained. It's basically just it's either a very cynical right narrative, which is really dangerous because I wouldn't be surprised if the Trump administration tries to make Antifa a terrorist group, and then it's going to be a group that we all have to seriously work and protect.
Well, it's not even a group. That's the thing is, if you label Antifa a terrorist group, then you are saying that we can literally label anybody, anywhere, anytime a terrorist because there's no group. It's not that there's some organization that people have meetings. It's literally just people who are anti-fascist. And
it's
they're
spontaneous
not all violent
organizing to protect people from fascism, and people in a moment when we have a fascistic president, we have a fascistic president, and people are sitting around whining and worrying and neuroticizing about a group that's putting itself, whether they do specific things that we agree with or disagree with, fundamentally they're putting themselves physically on the line to protect the country from incredibly dangerous and disgusting people. And if you don't understand that fundamental context, then the rest of what you say does not have credibility.
Hashtag retired reefer cake. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, man. Take care. All right. Jesse Waters always looks terrified when he talks. He's got an insight about Donald Trump. Maybe it's good that the president's a mental case. Here he is on the 5.
55% in a Morning Consult poll said Trump is not stable. Yeah.
Well, can I just stable, conventional politicians have gotten us trillion dollars into debt, open borders, and stagnant wages. So that's why Donald Trump was elected.
Stable, traditional politicians have not endorsed Nazis overtly. Stable, traditional politicians do not make bizarre comments of a sexual nature about their daughters. And by the way, what exactly, even by the metrics that I'm sure some moron like Jesse Waters doesn't even understand to begin with, has this unstable politician achieved, even when it comes to Waters' goals of taking food out of children's mouths, destroying healthcare, and handing money to useless rich people like him? Last call of the day. I know we're leaving a lot of people on the line. Actually, we can get to 2 more, but we're out of here by 2. If I leave you on, you can try me at around 7, Michael Brooks Show. You're calling at a 678 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Andy in Atlanta.
Hey, Andy, what's going on, man?
Hey, there was one. I was in 2 things really. One, Wayne Allen Root as a grifter from the 90s.
Uh-huh.
He did football betting. He would tell you, I can pick the game, blah, 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 and all this stuff. I heard him on Sports Talk Radio
Oh, that's
all
great.
the time. He's like, he wanted to be like Jimmy the Greek or something. I mean, he's a
That makes
grifter
sense.
from day one. So when he sits there and says, college, blah, blah, he graduated. What kind of career did he graduate into other than grifting?
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
and he's
of course.
grifting them now.
Yeah, of course.
The right wing. He's changed.
Yeah.
Second thing, you know, it's kind of frustrating here. I'm in Atlanta. I hear a lot of right-wing radio talk. And I listen to your guys' show because I get informed. But anyways, they were sitting there talking about yesterday, Herman Cain was sitting there talking about how Donald Trump is being blocked by putting the record number of openings for judicial appointments. And I'm like, well, number one, you got the ability to not block them like with Reed when Reed got rid of the filibuster. But number two, and the main point is, how on earth did there get to be a record number of openings? And that was he blames the Democrats for blocking Republican nominations and slow walking it. But I'm like, you had a Supreme Court pick that got delayed, and you had a record number of openings, highest ever by the Republicans, and it just they don't seem to. He tells his listeners this, and they all just suck it up.
Yeah,
and it's like, I don't know how you can, when they think they're informed, and they're totally misinformed, and it just really. I don't know how.
It's a cult. It's a cult. It's not politics. It's a cult. Or politics can be cults. But I think, you know, that's why when people get into these persuasion conversations, I mean, I think that we should be talking to and advocating for as many people as possible. And there's plenty of problems inside the Democratic Party and plenty of failures. But that type of people, if you're listening to Herman Cain on the radio as anything other than a joke, well, you're taking advice from Rain Allen Root. I mean, do you really have the cognitive capacity? I mean, I'm being honest with you. Like, maybe that's not even the right way of framing it. Maybe you might be great at your job or whatever, but do you really have the emotional or political ability to take in new information and do analysis? I mean, honestly, I just don't see it.
Those people basically take up the time that people they would spend listening to good shit, and they like that's the model of the right, is just waste people's time talking about Benghazi and shit.
Right. Or apparently waste people's time talking about being worried about Antifa.
Thanks. You guys have a good vacation.
Thanks a million, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. I can't get to any more calls. If you need to call in for the other show at 7. Because we had to be tight today. Let me read through, because a bunch of IMs. Joseph Ballin, enjoy your vacation, cucks. Wait, Ballin is like having a resurgence here. Enjoy your vacation, cucks. In the meantime, Mattis is considering sending weapons to aid Ukrainian fascists to start a war with Russia. I don't know about that, but I will look into it. I don't support heavy arming Ukraine, though. Denver Dave, Ohio Republican John Kasich, and Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper are putting the third way band back together again for a 2020 unity ticket. Will someone please tell the third way politicians that the alt center is a myth? Is this happening? I haven't seen this. This looks like a nightmare.
Wait, what happened? People are saying the alt center is a myth.
No, that the point of the IM is that apparently Kasich and Hickenlooper are considering running on a joint unity ticket in 2020. To which I say, fuck you forever. Okay. Let's see. Gonna have to get on that. Blue Dragon, you're interviewing a Greyjoy? Can Chris Christie appoint himself as senator? I kind of wish the sports radio thing would have worked out for him. I don't know whether he can do that or not. I don't know the law around that. I'm sure if anybody would do something like that, it would be him. Who is Fred? Good question. Bankser the Robber. Michael, how do I listen to your full podcast as a paying member if I'm not listening live? I use the iTunes as an aggregator for my podcasts and the MR app for you guys, longtime MR contributor. Thank you so much. That all gets released to Patreon.
Yeah, Patreon. Once you log in, there'll be a RSS link on the top right, and you plug that into your podcast feed.
Yeah, there'll be exactly. So if
or just on the Patreon website.
Yeah, or just on the Patreon website. It's very, very easy. And in addition to the extra content, sometimes we put up infographics. I'm going to be starting to write daily briefs, and there's also Discord chat. And if you're at a $21 level or above, there's a monthly call. 33 or above, you get tailored impressions from me. There's a lot of different stuff. But it's very, very easy to listen to once you become a patron. And thanks for all the support. Jakob. Michael, it pains me to watch people try to find equivalent radicals on the left in a desperate attempts for both sides to do it. BLM and Antifa just can't compare to a new wave of Confederate, Crusader, fascist militias on the right. Of course not.
It's a compensation strategy to stay neutral.
It's a compensation strategy to stay neutral. And, even like there was this tweet going around that some economist, so there was some guy who writes for, I think it was The Economist, and it was like one of these very like, one can criticize BLM, but it's unfair to say that they hold racist views. And it's like, sure, I'm glad that The Economist did a little debunk, but nobody that's saying Black Lives Matter is racist is a good faith actor. And, and anybody who's trying to make it a conversation about Antifa is either deeply, deeply deluded and uninformed or a bad faith actor. And this is why, people criticize me about, and I'll do debates. I'll debate Ben Shapiro. I'll debate Sam Harris, whatever. Sure, it's fun. It drives up numbers. People root for their same side. Maybe sometimes you can, puncture a myth. But most of this stuff is just not, we're not all trying to get to the same place. And if somebody today in our current politics is worried about Black Lives Matter or Antifa, chances are their politics and where they want society to go and what they think is a problem is fundamentally out of alignment with anything that certainly I care about. Let me use MR to debut my political group, Transgender Satanic Communists for an All-Black Future. Stand by for our policy positions, such as replacing the police with an SJW force, socialist re-education camps for cis white men, declaring all public property a safe space with posted trigger warnings, and putting chemicals in the water to turn the damn frogs gay. That's hilarious.
Publicizing a group like that would take some heat off Antifa because then it would make them look moderate. By
yeah,
comparison.
Exactly. That's a good strategy. We should try it. I'm sure there's plenty of morons out there who would believe it was a real group. Sam voice. Seinfeld isn't the only show that exports Jewish neurosis in comedy. There's a little ditty known as The Majority Report, and I Love Apples. Hello? Pundit Pyramid. Racist billionaire is a Republican presidential candidate archetype, which is a perfect description of what the Democratic equivalent, perhaps a T-shirt wearing millionaire. Good point. Fair point. Angry. I meant what I said yesterday. You are you are all shiny people, happy people. That is all. I got to get to that video of Sam later. I'm not wanting to open new stuff in that tab. I'm sorry. Ryan from Ohio. The news that 1 in 10 Bernie Sanders primary voters unfortunately ultimately voted for Trump in the general election was incredibly disheartening. I don't know about that number.
Well, 25% of Hillary primary voters voted for McCain.
And 25% of Hillary primary voters voted for McCain. So yeah, that's half
of
10.
them. Half of them were racist. Apparently, sorry, but half of them were racist. Or, I mean, just to be more specific, they said being white isn't an advantage.
Right. So it's
and
like
the
5%.
Other half must have been probably a little bit racist too, but just didn't answer that question the wrong way.
Right.
Because I think
for the scam.
In order to vote for Trump, you need to have clearly racial blind spots.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, that number. I mean, the problem is the election was so close that a bunch of things were the deciding factor. You could probably say the same thing about Jill Stein voters in a couple of states.
Right.
Like if they just all voted for Hillary. So.
Well, this guy's the biggest problem in the last election was not identity politics, but personal politics. Well, I mean, it's all connected. It's also proof that Bernie would have won, left his best, Stein 2020, Baba Booey, Baba Booey. Negro Spiritual, OMG, what song did you play after Cliff left? Baba Bar Mitzvah Booey. That was instrumental for The Scientist by Nas. Ryan Tennant. Have you read Anthony Antimanic's interview in Vanity Fair? It touches on the president's show ability to predict Trump's behavior. The whole thing is worth a read. I haven't read it. This quote sums it up. Donald Trump is simply a series of emotional states that are combined together to create an illusion of a personality. And all he really is whatever grievance you have, whatever resentment, whatever pettiness lives in you. It's terrifying that a comedian has a better understanding of Trump than the other media pundits combined. That's no surprise, though. Red Sun Gone Green, film recommendation. Mate Wan, Jay Tingle, research 90% of teenagers think sexual violence in Game of Thrones is historically accurate. The DX Fool, hi folks, regarding Steve Bannon in Hollywood. Actually, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin has a bigger impact. Okay. According to Hollywood Reporter, before joining Trump, Mnuchin provided funding seed money for blockbusters such as Batman vs. Superman, the Lego movies, Wonder Woman, and that's when you see Mnuchin credited as a producer, and investors included Bill Gates and, wait for it, the Koch brothers. Matt should watch Glory and Gangs of New York, about 19th century history. I have seen
Gangs of New York.
Henry Wallace, film recommendation for Matt. Tour de Force, criticizing the American industrial age and the rise of robber baron capitalism, Wild Wild West.
Nice.
Starring Will Smith and Kevin Kline. Truly fearless filmmaking. That's the second one, a joke. Okay. And the final, Born Blue. I assumed Reefer Cake Song was referring to Fred Trump and his KKK arrest back in the 1930s. Maybe I didn't listen carefully enough.
Yeah, that wasn't it.
That was probably not it. And the final I am of the day. I own a copy of Ayn Rand's Fountainhead for a while. Is it worth reading to understand Republican ideology? I don't think it's necessary to subject yourself to that.
I think
it's pretty turgid writing.
Well, Fountainhead is probably it's much more readable than Atlas Shrugged, and I think if you ever get into an argument with a libertarian who's like, "Have you even read them?" They usually are pretty nonplussed when you say, "Actually, I've read the Fountainhead."
And I say, and I read Dianetics too, and Dianetics was better. We're on vacation next week, everybody. We're back on Tuesday, September 5th, I believe that is. But fresh shows for you, except for public, there's no new public show on Thursday, but for members, all new shows. Catch me at 6 p.m. tonight for the Michael Brooks Show live on YouTube. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back soon. Have a good week.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. Finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive.